goes back to a simple moral question. The government's saying it wants to save between 4 and 5 billion pounds. It's morally wrong, it's un-Labour, and it's unconscionable to try and balance the books on the backs of the poor and the disabled. You know better than I that the average disability living allowance payment is £12 per day. Now, if we're wanting to have more money with the Treasury, why on earth do people think it's morally right to take £12 on average a day from a disabled person rather than take money off some of these billionaires who pay not their fair share in tax? And when politicians talk about making tough choices, alarm bells ring amongst disabled people and amongst other people in our society who've been treated really badly, because they know that often tough choices are a euphemism for going with the grain of the establishment and making the poor and the disabled pay, not taking the money off those at the top who have done very well even in the last 14 years of conservative austerity. We've got more billionaires than ever before, yet the proposal is to take money of people who need assistance to cut up their own food and need assistance to dress themselves and need assistance to wash themselves. And I use that example because it illuminates the practical injustice of the tightening of the eligibility criteria for the personal independence payment. You know better than I do that as it stands, you can accumulate points across the assessment and get your PIP payment. The proposal, just so everyone outside this meeting is clear, is that you need to get at least 4 points in at least one area in order to keep or get your personal independence payment. And that's why I use that example. So, under the Tories' appalling benefits system, someone who needs assistance to cut up their own food and needs assistance to wash themselves and needs assistance to dress themselves, under the Tories' appalling benefits system, they do get personal independence payments. Under our government's reforms, that person could have the personal independence payment taken off them. How on earth is that right? It's all about saving money. It's all about taking an easy choice. It would save up to, supposedly, £4 to £5 billion a year. Yet £24 billion a year could be raised by having a wealth tax of 2% on assets over £10 million. That would raise £24 billion. And that would affect 20,000 people in this country, 20,000 of some of the richest people in this country. And my constituents in Leeds East are frightened, and they're right to be frightened, because if this reform goes through in relation to tightening eligibility for PIP, both in relation to age and in relation to the 4 points rule, then they're right to be worried, because it'll affect a lot of people in Leeds. There's some new research came out the other day which showed that 38,000 people in Leeds get the personal independence payment, the disability, the daily living allowance component, and over 18,000 of those 38,000 people in Leeds are set to lose that payment if these reforms go through. Now, of course, I'm prepared to vote against these reforms, and of course, many of my colleagues are, because we didn't get into politics in order to make people poorer. We didn't get into politics in order to attack disabled people. We didn't get into politics to make life even worse for people who've had such an awful time, not only in the last 14 years, but right down the decades. But I want to be clear. I don't want the vote even to take place. I don't want the vote even to take place. I want the government to drop this policy now. As a result of campaigns led by disabled people outside Parliament and MPs inside Parliament giving a voice to those campaigns. So I think the upcoming lobby of MPs in Parliament by disabled people is very, very important. I think it's really important that disabled people and their friends and family contact their MP and make it clear to them the effect this policy will have on them. The point I raised in the chamber today was in relation to the government's own impact assessment. Now, the government's own impact assessment says 250,000 people will be pushed into poverty by these cuts. But the true impact on poverty is even worse than that, because new Department of Work and Pensions figures obtained by a Freedom of Information request shows that 700,000 families already in poverty will be hit even harder. I think it's outrageous that Freedom of Information requests are necessary in order to gather this information, and yet they're expecting MPs to vote for this without that information. So we need the government to come clear on that. And it comes at a time, doesn't it, when disabled people feel like they're being demonised, and there seems to be misunderstanding, if I can get on some of my hobby horses, about what the working class means. Now, because politicians don't dare use the phrase working class anymore, they start to use phrases like working people instead, which excludes some disabled people. Now, of course, a lot of people on PIP, a lot of disabled people, are in work, and some aren't. But the message that disabled people tell me that they hear, with some of the language used by politicians, is that some people are valued less than others, disabled people are valued less than others, and that people's worth can only be measured by whether or not they're creating profit for somebody, or by how much growth they create. Now, that is an immoral way to view the value of a human being, in my opinion. And we've got here a speaker over there who spoke and addressed Parliament the other day, and he made a very important point about the so-called assisted dying bill. And I know people have different opinions on this. I understand why some people are for it in the abstract, but this policy, introduced to the society in which we live, is really, really worrying, isn't it? Yeah. And I think more and more MPs are realising that. And all this effort is being put in by some MPs, pushed by the organisation that used to be called the Voluntary Euthanasia Society, until it changed its name. But they're being pushed, all this effort, all this thinking, how can we allow people to do this? And at the same time we're taking support of people. And many people will feel that without the personal independence payments, their experience will be that their life becomes intolerable. We should be taking support from people. We should be taking the little joys from people that every single person in this country deserves. And taking away the personal independence payment, some MPs or some ministers seem to think that will suddenly launch loads of people into work. No, take £12 off them a day, and suddenly they'll end up getting jobs the next day they didn't have jobs before. My fear is that the clue's in the name. By taking away the personal independence payment, you take away people's independence. That's what the payment's for. It doesn't make them more independent by taking the personal independence payment off them. So I'm proud to be part of this campaign. It's a campaign that I think we can win. But it's not going to be won by MPs in Parliament. It's going to be won by disabled people across the country, taking a lead, supported by MPs in Parliament, and saying that enough is enough. 800,000 people are set to lose their personal independence payment. An average loss of £4,500 a year. That's £100 per week from some of the poorest in our society. And just so we're clear, currently half of all people on PIP don't secure the 4 points needed in any category, and so would not meet the government's new criteria. In total, 3 million families will lose an average of £1,720 per year.
Shame.
And that includes 150,000 carers who will no longer receive carers allowance. And some MPs seem to be missing this point. PIP is a gateway to other things as well, so we're going to have carers losing their carers allowances. 1 in 5 of all disabled households will be worse off. And then the other question as well, which I think is particularly relevant here in London, is that if, as I understand it, if you're on a personal independence payment, then the benefit cap doesn't apply to you. And given how sky-high rents are, particularly in London, and of course across the country to varying degrees, isn't that going to be the case that this is going to make more and more disabled people homeless in our capital city and across our country? Obviously, that's not the kind of change that people wanted to see after 14 years of being kicked around by the Tories. We can't stand by and allow a hostile environment to be developed and deepened for disabled people. What kind of society do we want to be? We want to be a society where people are enabled, where people are supported, where people feel that they can achieve their full potential. And I totally understand why my constituents tell me they're sick of being lectured by people on £90,000 and more in the House of Commons about what they should do, how they should get a job, and they should stop being so lazy. And we're dividing people between the strivers and the scroungers. The truth is, people are struggling out there through no fault of their own, and they need to be supported. They need to be supported, and I'm here really not only to give my message of support and to answer your questions about the campaign, but also to listen to you. So if you want to, in this session, share your experiences with me, share your ideas for the campaign with me, then I'd be very keen to hear that. Because in relation to your experiences, that empowers me and other colleagues in Parliament to say it's not just something that we thought up, someone's actually said that to us in a meeting. We can share your experience, both in the House of Commons chamber, on the media, and in private meetings with ministers as well. And as it stands, I think there's over 100 Labour MPs who have said they're not going to support this. Now, there's going to be a big battle going on to confuse many of them into not opposing it. And there'll be all sorts of mystifications of the policy, complicated documents, released, which might make people think, oh, this all sounds very complicated. Maybe it's not as bad as I was told. But the reality is this: it's fundamentally bad because it starts off trying to save money and take money off disabled people. And that's the root cause of this being a wrong policy. That's the root cause of this being an immoral policy. And that's the root cause of this being a policy that you and we together have to ensure never makes it to a vote. And if it does make it to a vote, I want to see it defeated. I want to see it defeated.